We are live at Studio B. This is your day-to-day BYU sports play-by-play. I'm Spencer Linton alongside Jerem Jordan. Game day eve.
Game day eve, baby. On the call tomorrow night on ESPN is Brock Osweiler, the great Arizona State Sun Devil who played in the NFL as well. He's been on the program before, but I talked to him earlier this morning about the BYU-Kansas State matchup. Of course, the quarterbacks, the running backs, third downs, LES, Cougar Tails, everything. Here's that conversation with Brock. Brock, welcome back to the program. Great to have you on the show again.
Thank you, Jerem. Great to be back.
Okay, let's talk about BYU and Kansas State. This is a huge game for both teams. Kansas State, one of the preseason picks to be in contention for the title. Meanwhile, BYU surprising people at 3-0. What do you make of the matchup?
Well, I think for starters, and there's a lot of meat and potatoes with this matchup. But I think the most important thing to note is I just think it's going to be a great game. You just mentioned it. Kansas State coming into the season, one of the favorites to win the Big 12 conference. And if you watch their first three games of the season, you see why. They have maybe a generational talent at quarterback, two great running backs, physical offensive line, good defense, great in turnovers, very veteran-looking team. And then on the other hand, I don't really need to explain BYU to you or your fan base. I think you guys know your team very well. But I think the biggest thing to note is, coming from last year where you missed the bowl game, which is, very unlike a BYU football team, the team looks completely different this year. You're getting really good quarterback play. You've established the run game on the offensive side of the ball. And then with that, you're starting to hit some shot plays down the field, right? Kind of the typical MO of a great BYU football team. Let's be physical up front, and let's take some shots and connect on those down the field. And you guys have done a tremendous job of that through the first three games. And so, when you combine two undefeated teams, conference game, Lavelle Edwards Stadium under the lights, whiteout, I think it's going to be a fantastic game and an even better atmosphere, and I can't wait to get up there and call the game.
And we can't wait for you to get here. It's going to be fun. The retro unis from the '96 BYU team that went 14-1 is fun because that team beat Kansas State in the Cotton Bowl. In comes Kansas State, perfectly timed, a little bit of snark, which I like. The quarterback matchup's going to be fun in this one. You mentioned Jake Retzloff for BYU putting up 318 of total low a week, which is pretty good. Avery Johnson, who stayed home to go to Kansas State, was heavily recruited nationally. What do you make of that matchup? And does Jake Retzloff have to out total offense Avery Johnson for BYU to win?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yes. I really do think that is the matchup of this game. If you watch how both football teams have operated through the first three games, everything goes through the quarterback position, whether that's in the pass game, quarterback designed runs, zone read schemes where the quarterback has an opportunity to pull the football, and then you go to the RPO scheme where there's the run pass option. So really everything goes through these quarterbacks. The thing that's impressed me about Jake early on in this season is compared to last year, he's getting the football out very quickly. You can tell that he's confident. He's seeing the field very, very well. And especially last week against Wyoming, I was super impressed with how fast that ball was getting out of his hand. He was making good, quick decisions. And then, the run game was established from there. And then when it was time to take shots down the field, Jake was connecting and being very accurate with his throws. Flip it over to Avery Johnson. You just mentioned it, very, very highly recruited. Every single school in the country offered him a scholarship, wanted him to go play for them. But like you said, he stayed home, which I think is really special. He's from Kansas, and you can tell playing for Kansas State means a lot to him. And I think one of the best examples of how good this sophomore quarterback is, you have to think about who was the starter for Kansas State last year, and that was Will Howard. And Will Howard had a fantastic year at the quarterback position, had an opportunity to go into the NFL. He would have been drafted, but instead, he's the starting quarterback at Ohio State this year. So I think that says everything about who Avery Johnson is. The fact that he pushed out a kid who had already been a multi-year starter And now that quarterback starting at Ohio State, and Kansas State was completely fine with it. There's obviously a ton of respect and appreciation for Will, and those conversations between Coach Kleiman and Will are very well documented. You can find them online. But I think it just shows how much talent Avery has. And I think one more thing to put on top of that, there has been a Big 12 coach that's been quoted saying that he thinks he reminds him of a young Lamar Jackson. So I think that's very high praise. And I think you're going to see two great quarterbacks duel it out tomorrow night.
He's a right-handed sunshine from Remember the Titans with the hair to me. It's fun to watch, 100%. Man. The run game of Kansas State is notable. DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards, those guys are dynamic. Dylan, of course, with the punt return touchdown last week against Arizona. Kansas State made Arizona look silly, and Arizona was supposed to be good, and they were good. They had a 9-game win streak. How does BYU slow down Kansas State, who's running for 244 a game? Do they need to make Kansas State pass because it's only 167 a game right now?
You just hit the nail on the head. I think in order to keep up with the points that Kansas State is used to putting on the board, you have to take away their security blanket, their comfort zone. And it's, everybody in the stadium is going to know it. Kansas State, they want to come in and establish the run. And that's what they do week in and week out. And there's really a three-headed monster in the backfield. You mentioned the name. So you have Avery Johnson at quarterback, Dylan Edwards at running back. He's kind of the speedster. You give him any sort of space and he's gone. And then DJ Giddens is really, to me, when I watch him on film, reminds me of a true 3-down back, NFL style, good hands. They use him a lot in the pass game. He's physical. He can run between the tackles. So when you have those three guys in the backfield together, and there's a lot of personnel groupings where all three of them are on the field at the same time, they're doing that because they want to run the football. So if you're BYU, I think your best chance to win this football game, you have to control the line of scrimmage, and you have to find a way to take away the run game. And more than likely, that means bringing an extra safety into the box, playing man-to-man defense, and saying, hey, listen, we're going to load up the box. We're going to leave our corners on islands, but, hey, beat us through the pass game. Because you just mentioned it. Kansas State's averaging about 170 yards per game through the air. So they've been efficient. Avery has done a great job of protecting the football. I believe he only has one interception on the season. But you have to test Avery. And Avery is a true sophomore. Started one game a season ago, although he had some solid playing time. The start came in the final game of the year in the bowl game. And then you look at where they played this year. He's never played in an environment like Lavelle Edwards Stadium. And obviously, like I said, he's a once-in-a-generation talent. But until you go into a stadium like Lavelle Edwards and prove that you can win and play composed and poised in that environment, you got to test the young kid.
BYU has wrecked some opposing quarterbacks whose first kind of major road start was in Lavelle Edwards Stadium, to your point. I can't wait to see it. Of note, as you mentioned, receiving. No receivers have a touchdown catch this year for Kansas State. They have four to tight ends, 2 to running backs. BYU's not allowed a passing touchdown period in 3 games, which would be a fun matchup. I want to ask you about this. Are you weirded out by BYU's third down numbers, 28%, yet on fourth down, 8 of 10?
Yeah, I heard Kalani talk about that in his press conference this week. The media was getting on him a little bit about the third down success rate, but he goes, hey, look at what we're doing on fourth down. I would say this. I don't get too caught up in the numbers throughout the first month of the season. Weeks 1 and 2, because there's no preseason games in college football, as we know, a lot of teams are working out some kinks, knocking off the rust, figuring out what their identity is going to be. And in that regard, okay, who's going to be the go-to guy on third down? What do we do best in the pass game? Can we run the football on third and short to pick up these, or do we need to get the ball in the air? So to me, I don't put much concern on it. You look at Kansas State, they're hovering right around 30% on third down as well, but they're undefeated, and they're putting up points on the board. So I'm not going to pay too much attention to those numbers, but as we get into October and especially later in the month, I think those numbers will be very telling of how much success you're having.
Brock Osweiler's on BYU Sports Nation. You can catch him on the call on ESPN coming up Saturday night. It is a late one. You talked about this. 8:30 Mountain Time for Kansas State. It's 9:30 local time. It's elevation. It's retro unis. It's the Cougar Tail vanilla flavor they're throwing out there as well with the maple. That kind of environment, what kind of influence, as you mentioned, can that have on a game that BYU wants to win to validate its start?
I think the environment can have a huge impact on the game. You know, Kansas State has been a very good football program for a very long time. And Coach Kleiman, their head coach, you know, he's no stranger to winning. You look at the success he had at North Dakota State and what he's brought to Kansas State. So, you know, he's going to have his football team ready to go. And for the most part, the Wildcats are a very veteran-led football team. But the one pivotal piece, like I already spoke about, it's the quarterback. He's a true sophomore. I believe this will be his 5th career start. He's never played in an environment like this. So, you know, the fans can play a major role in this football game. And you know, I tell you, it's one of those deals, you know, obviously last year for you guys, the season didn't go as planned. But making the transition into the Big 12, you knew there was going to be some hiccups. There was going to be a learning curve and things like that. And you return a lot of those guys. And so I almost view this as, and without being in the locker room and knowing this, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but if I was in that locker room, I'm looking at this as a chance to really kind of get a program-defining win in the Big 12 conference. And if you can pull this off at home in front of your great fan base that you guys always have, you know, this can generate a lot of momentum for the rest of the season and really help with where you guys go.
Hey, 2-7 last year. This would be a big one for the third one against a ranked team. Let's go. Last but not least, your Sun Devils are 3-0 after going 3-9 last year. What do you make of Sam Levitt, whose brother Dallin played at BYU for a bit? Cam Scattaboo and the boys at Texas Tech this week.
Yeah, well, shoot, Cam Scattaboo, let's start there. Wow. If you've yet to watch Cam Scattaboo play football, whether you're an Arizona State fan or not, turn it on. If you love football, you're going to love the way that kid plays. He's given it his all every single snap from the running back position, which is just such a treat to watch. But, yeah, hats off to Kenny Dillingham and his staff at this point and the rest of the team. Big turnaround from last year. You know, 3-0. Had a good battle with Texas State last week on the road. And it's been a phenomenal start. But now I think you'll really get the benchmark of where Coach Dillingham and his team in year 2, where they are, similar to BYU transitioning into the Big 12. Now that you get into conference play, I think this is where you'll really find out where your program stands.
Hey, we're looking forward to homecoming in Tempe there on November 23rd, BYU and Arizona State. Hey, let's get you on the call for that one. Brock, we appreciate the time. Thanks for the insight, and have a great call Saturday night.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.